welcome. How are we?
Not bad. Yourself?
Good, thank you. Thanks very much for coming in.
No problem.
So you grew Hydrogen all the way from a bedroom startup to one of Scotland's most probably successful digital agencies, and all the way to exit.
Yep.
And we'll talk about that, I'm sure, as we go on. But before we get into the detail, I'm always fascinated how businesses start, because they start with always in the same thing, a flash of an idea in somebody's head, no matter how big or how small, they all start the same way. So what was the concept of Hydrogen? How did that idea first come to light?
I'd worked in various different types of agency throughout my entire life. So I'd been in advertising agencies, digital agencies, PR agencies. And I could see the previous agency to creating Hydrogen was that it was a digital agency. It was doing really well, but it was building multi-million-pound websites. But at the bottom end of the scale, there was these things called Wix and Squarespace coming along, and they were just basically chewing up the digital space because they were coming along and taking away the bottom end of the market. But there was this thing called social over here that nobody was really paying attention to in the digital space, and I was like, look, there's something here. I got an opportunity to go and become the MD of a social agency, so I went and done that. And that got bought over, and it was part of a kind of a big conglomerate. I then obviously found myself in a position where they smashed a whole bunch of businesses together, despite my business doing very well. They smashed these businesses together, and I was redundant as a result of that, or my MD role was redundant as a result of that. So I had a bit of cash behind me, but I had this kind of burning thing in my head that social was going to be the next big thing, but nobody is, in my eyes, was doing...
When was this? What date?
This was 2015. So I remember when I first created Hydrogen, stepping into boardrooms, having to convince people they needed a Facebook page. You know what I mean? There was loads of MDs and whatever, and business owners going, I don't really believe in this social stuff now. That's an alien concept nowadays, but back then...
It's not long ago, but is it 2015?
I know, it's crazy. It's crazy how quickly things move. So there was a need for a social agency doing social properly, I suppose, in Scotland. And that was really it. I had a bit of cash for the first time in my life because I had a redundancy payout, and I probably had enough of a runway to go at it. Bit of negotiation with the wife, and she said, look, you've always wanted to run your own agency. Let's give it a go, because this was now or never situation. So that was it.
So was it you by yourself, or was there a founder involved?
There was another founder. So I basically came up with the concept of Hydrogen, and then my head of social at my previous agency, a guy called Daniel Ray, who's based in Hamilton actually. So he sort of said to me, look, I've still got a job. Go and find a client. Go and get this off the ground effectively. And if there's a job there for me to come and do, then that's it. So we got our first client on board, and I was like, look, I think this is going to be a going concern. Let's do it. So I convinced them to come on board, and we got going.
What was that first customer?
It was a company called Hachette Partworks. Hachette are the second largest book publisher in Europe. Behind Penguin, so we were quite lucky. It was a previous customer from the previous business.
Not bad first customer.
Yeah, it was good. It kind of got us off and running quite quickly as a result of that. But that gave us enough. It wasn't enough to pay the wages effectively, but it was enough to sort of say, look, there's something here. And then there was a lot of phone calls happening around about that to try and win customers around about it.
And what was that main product that you took to market? Was it simply setting up the likes of Facebook campaigns for them?
Yeah, I think back in the day, just the simplicity of actually running somebody's social pages, it was looking at it strategically and saying, how are we going to utilise social to change their business? So I think there was loads of agencies that set up in the same year as us, but I think a lot of people were treating it as we're just going to produce content for your social pages. We took a much more strategic view on it and sort of saying, right, well, look, how are we going to change your business with using social to drive real kind of positive change within the business? And we'd done an insights first approach. I can remember spending about 10 grand in an insights tool when I had no clients, but it was like, look, we need to do this. This needs to be in place to allow us to win the sorts of clients that we want to win. So it was utilising social for the greater good rather than just ticking a box and producing content. But it used to be strategy first, and then it was about creating content, and then it was about driving change within the business, whether that's bringing in business for them or driving brand change or brand positioning or whatever else it happened to be.
And how quick did you start to scale up? So you had your first customer, which good brand.
Yeah.
Very often it's the first one or two are okay, but it's then repeating that, isn't it?
Yeah. We grew an average of 30% year on year.
Wow.
With no investment, which is quite a nice place to be. I think we were very much right place, right time, right narrative. I think because we were taking a big company approach to things, like within 8 months we had won SSE. We got through their procurement, and basically we were delivering all the social media for SSE, so we had them on as a brand. We quite quickly won Highland Park off the back of that, so it kind of started to snowball, and once you start to get some larger brands on board, you kind of get that snowball effect.
What do you think that was? Was it early mover advantage, or was it a particular approach?
I think in a space where nobody was really talking the way that we were talking, I think that really helped. I think that if you think back to the early days of social, there was a lot of agencies coming out and they were doing cool stuff. And that wasn't what we done. We were like, right, let's be that safe pair of hands. And if you're a big business like SSE, you don't want somebody to be risky with your brand. You know, you spent billions creating this brand. You don't want to be in a position where you want a risky company to work with it. So what processes can we put in place to allow that to be developed safely, handled safely, escalation paths, insights that show that we're really driving positive change for the business. What is our kind of comm strategy if there is an emergency situation? All these sorts of things we were putting in place rather than let's do risky cool stuff. And I think that narrative really kind of landed home with a lot of the larger companies anyway.
Absolutely, because you even see now how paranoid brands are of something going wrong with one post.
I actually think that was the key thing back then was the lack of control. Up until really, I suppose, the advent of social, brands were entirely in control of the narrative. You know what I mean? You could put out a billboard ad and nobody could say anything about it. You know what I mean? You could put out a TV campaign and nobody really discuss it. So all of a sudden, you're putting a brand presence out there in the social world, and people were commenting, and negatively so, especially if you're an energy brand, for instance. So, you know, there was how we handled that and how we handled the narrative around about the brand was a big thing for a lot of CEOs at that time. So I think, as I said, right conversation, right time, right place.
And how long did it take for you to convince your co-founder to come in with your or business partner?
He was really quick. I think he loved the concept. He actually, when I was made redundant, he was the one that said, "What we're going to do." So I remember it was just more of a case of he was in a safe place, and for him to convince his wife that actually I'm going to leave a job here and move over to this unknown. So as soon as I had that first client, he was like, "Right, cool, let's do it."
He was good to go.
Yeah.
So if someone's sitting out there with a friend or a pal who are thinking about starting a business together, what advice would you give to people who are thinking, right, we're going to be co-founders, we're going to go into this with our eyes open? What?
I think the uniqueness and the great thing about myself and Dan is we were very different people. I think we then had distinct roles within the business, so we weren't clashing.
Yeah.
So we actually, I don't think in the entire time we were in the business, we had an argument once.
Wow. Really?
Which was great. You know, I think I was very much the kind of front end sales strategy sort of guy, and Dan was very much at the start anyway, the technical guy. He was the guy who knew how all the platforms worked effectively. So he was delivery engine and I was the front end sales engine very much at the start, and that allowed us to kind of get off the ground. And then we both kind of been able to sell to different people as well. Like, you know, I'm much more of an extrovert and Dan's an introvert, but that allowed us to he was able to have technical conversations with particularly technical clients, and I was more the, you know, more gregarious clients who wanted to, you know, change the world effectively. Yeah. So it really, really balanced out, but it worked really well for us. So I think that having that clear distinction, I see a lot of people who potentially go into business and it's two very gregarious individuals or salespeople, and they therefore clash, because effectively who's doing the back end, who's doing the dirty work effectively, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, and I think when you have two people that are like, ego can get in the way, can't it? People's egos can become challenging.
100%, yeah. That's, but I think we worked really well as a team. So
excellent. And how quickly did you start to have to bring in other people into this?
We had before the day that we launched, I had another employee.
Right. Okay.
So that was interesting. But no, it was very quickly. We were like, look, we need this, and then within 2 months we had another employee. So we started to scale really, really quickly. That had its challenges because cash flow was a real issue at the start. I always remember this number seared into my brain. I had £214 in my account, and I had 2 weeks to pay everybody, because effectively I'd burnt my runway, let's call it that. And yeah, like a few phone calls had to be made that said, look, you need to pay us, otherwise we go to the wall, because I'm at the bottom of my reserves, you know what I mean? I'd taken all my wife's savings, my savings, everything was in this business, so I had obliterated it, but to the point it was just cash flow. The money was coming in, it was just we were kind of behind ourselves. So that was a few months in. That was my oh shit moment, if you want to call it that.
I think most people who want to start a business don't understand the reality. I speak to a lot of founders, and almost everyone has that story of I had to choose what bill to pay, and the real impact and guts to keep going as well.
I kind of knew it was going to happen. And I think because we'd built in positive relationships with clients, a lot of people sort of said, how do you get off and running? And I'd done a talk for Glasgow Chamber 2 weeks ago. And get asked the question, like, how do you sell at the very, very start? And I think the key thing for me was selling myself. So although we had this brand called Hydrogen, the reason that the Hydrogen was there was to give ourselves credibility. So that means when you go into a big room and you sort of go, right, who are you? It's not like Mike Scott and the gang, you know what I mean? It's got to be something that you can kind of take home to your mum, if you want to call it that. So like there was, people were able to introduce Hydrogen to their bosses and it felt like a solid business. But at the very start, Hydrogen didn't exist. The Hydrogen was me and obviously Dan. So there was a point of looking at it and saying, well, who do you sell at the very start? So it was us and our experience that we were going into the room and selling. And as a result, we were talking to clients about being very early stage in this journey. We were going to take them on a journey. We wanted them to come along with our journey. So they bought into us as businesses. Like Hachette was a long-term client of ours, but it now enabled me to make that phone call when we were at the wall. And I sort of said, right, look, is there any way that you can pay the bill early or whatever? And Tom was like, yeah, not a problem. Let's sort this out. We're not going to see you go to the wall effectively. Like, it's just a cash flow situation. So they were able to just give us their money a week or so early, which allowed me just to kind of keep the ball rolling, which was nice.
Did you? You said that did you ever take investment in the company?
No.
So when you were having those cash flow issues, was it not tempting to?
I don't think so. I think the fundamentals were it was quite a short term thing. The reason I started the business was to get away from having a boss.
Yeah.
And like if it had been investment from a bank, it'd have been different. But I didn't want to put my house down as security. So there was a point of looking at it and saying, well, tell you what, like, let's just ride this one out. Let's make this happen. So yeah, I think that was it. I think that was a fundamental for me. I didn't necessarily want a boss. I didn't want to take on any VC funding and some go to family and say, I need you to give me X because I need to get through that. So I didn't want somebody to sort of question where I was and what I was doing. It was very much being able to run the business myself was a key thing.
So the business grew organically, self-funded all the way up.
Yeah. Like we had no sales function, which was really good. Got a lot of inbound leads, which was, I think, due to the brand that we built. It was a really strong brand. We got ourselves quite quickly to Scotland's largest social media agency. So being Scotland's largest social agency, I suppose the reason that we kind of drove that narrative was if you're running a social project and you need a social agency, then why wouldn't you choose the largest company in Scotland to come in to the table at least and have a conversation? So we got in lots of rooms as a result of that. So yeah, we got lots of organic growth. We had no, as I said, sales function. The brand kind of drove a lot of that. So
yeah, was there any sliding doors moment where you look back in the journey, a certain chance meeting, a certain customer that came along?
Yeah, like so SSE would probably fall in. Obviously, there's Hachette being your foundation client. I think was a really good one for us. I think that kind of allowed us to have a conversation with a lot of other players. But I don't know if that was a sliding doors moment. That was from a previous relationship. SSE was a contact of Dan's actually. So he previously worked at SSE, and then he had a contact through them, and then it just became a conversation. We won that first project, which was just a small insights project, and that was due to the tool that I had paid money. I'd actually remember signing up for this tool, sat in the Fort car park, and Michelle, the person who ran it, the tool was called Meltwater. And she was like, look, it's the end of my quarter. I can give you a massive discount just now. I just need to get a sale over the line, like to end the quarter. And I was like, cool, fair enough. She was like, it's today or nothing. I was like, right, fine, let's just sign up to it. So it was like 50% off or whatever. And I was like, right, fine, let's make this happen. Paying out money before I had any clients signed up. But the reality of the situation there is if I hadn't signed up to that tool, we'd never have won the Insights project. And if we hadn't won the Insights project, we would never have got through procurement. And if we hadn't got through procurement, we would have probably found ourselves in a position where we wouldn't have got SSE, who then went on to become our largest client.
Yeah, so the conversation in the fort actually started
randomly. Yeah. If you kind of wind it all the way back, that's your moment. Is that phone call that says, right, look, that's now or never. And would I held off? Maybe, don't know. But
yeah, or bought something else or did something
possibly,
earlier day.
I don't know.
So, what would the people who work for you say about your leadership style? Do you think?
I don't know.
Didn't know it was going to turn into an interview, did you?
Yeah, no. It's I hope that they would say that I was fair. I hope that they would say that I was driven, and I hope that they would say that I cared about them. I got lots of good feedback when I left the business. Like, if you look at my social post that I put up the final day of the business, there was loads and loads of great comments in it, which really meant a lot to me. But I hope that they would say that I'd just done the right thing when I needed to do the right thing and was really kind of decisive. I think sometimes when you look at leadership, that's all I really wanted was somebody to sort of go, right, look, this is what we're doing and why we're doing it, and hopefully be a bit more kind of candid about that. But maybe fun. add fun in there if you want to add in fun, so I'm not properly boring.
So what is your leadership style? Are you right into the detail, or are you a high level chaos type of guy? Or
yeah, I hopefully not high level chaos. I'm high level. I don't think chaos. I think I kind of see the bigger picture. I'm trying to always see the bigger picture and sort of say, well, if we do this, what's the impact going to be over here? You've always kind of, I think for me, I had the goal in mind from the very start of Hydrogen. I knew at some point I was going to sell the business. I didn't know it was going to be as quick as it was, but I think that was the key thing for me, having a destination to sort of go, let's drive towards that. And as a result of that, you can be quite direct in what you're doing and decisive in the way that you make your decisions. Like, I see a lot of people, and they mull things over for months and months and months, and actually it just drives frustration within the business, whereas I was very much able to just go, we're going to do this, let's make it happen. And I think that's quite nice.
I'm a great believer in fail fast.
Yeah, like 100%. And we did make decisions throughout the business that we were like, why the hell did we do that?
What's the biggest one? What's the biggest mistake?
So we started the business called Social Media Training School during COVID, because there was a kind of view that it was like, look, there's online training required for a lot of businesses. There was loads of businesses getting created overnight, but the idea that you could go and do video training online, and we spent a fortune in that, like, 6 figures, trying to basically get it off the ground. And it got going, but very, very slowly. And then eventually, I think we kind of came out of COVID and we'd missed the boat on that one a little bit. So, that was probably the biggest one. I think the idea is still a sound idea. It was just we never really. I don't think we had the bandwidth to do it either at the same time. We kind of were like, look, this is going to take off. It never really happened. And then we were still trying to basically get ourselves out of COVID at the same time. So it was taking on too much. So
was COVID, from a business perspective, was it positive or negative? Because some businesses did really, really well in COVID. Others, it was a horrific thing.
Both. At the very start, it was horrific. Like, we were losing 40 grand a month. At the very, very start. So that was horrible. I remember actually, like, just sitting in my room, just being like, when is this going to end? Like, telling all the staff and telling the team, look, we're fine, we're going to be good. And the reality was that was my belief. Like, we were going to be fine. I was having daily conversations with clients though about how they needed to cut budgets, and our the cash flow just went through the floor. But we needed to service the clients, so we kind of kept everybody on, and we kind of ran with it. And but it bottomed out, thank God, before our cash flow ran out, or our cash reserves ran out, and we then ended up with a positive situation, because the reality then kicked in, and we kind of knew this would be the case, is that everything that was physical advertising needed to move somewhere, and it was all going to move digital. So all of a sudden we saw the rebound of the budgets, and the need, those people who'd originally said, why do we need social, were all of a sudden, we really need social because it's the only way that we're going to be able to go out to our marketplace, because everybody sat on their phone and our gardeners on furlough. So there was a point of saying, how do we make this happen? So in the end, it was a positive situation, but it was a hell of a roller coaster.
So if you've got, if you were doing some coaching today for a big customer, who is probably one of the older type brands now, they might have a LinkedIn page and do a couple of posts. What would you tell them to do in terms of how to build an online brand?
TikTok. It's one
even
of those
for corporates.
What?
Even for the corporate. Yeah.
Yep. I remember having conversations at the start to say that Facebook was required. Then along came Instagram, and everybody was like, why do we do it? Why do we need Instagram? Instagram's for the kids, right? Do you see this, how this plays out? It's the exact same thing. There is this constant rolling positive, like lead social media platform.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? That's like the kids start using it, then the adults start using it, then the kids
brands
stop
come
using
on,
it.
the brands kill it, and then it moves on. And it's exactly what happens all the time. So whether TikTok is not for you just now in your head, it will be. So if you want to get a lead on the competition, get in that space, the reach and the exposure that you're getting there. Like, I remember having a conversation with the team at Hydrogen. We were a social media agency, so we should be all over it. But I was like, I don't know, really, this doesn't feel like really something that we're going to get much business from. But just said to the team, like go for it. Let's do whatever you feel you can do. Obviously, there's some guidelines that we want to play around about there, but let's see what you can do. And we get loads of inbound new business from it. And we're a B2B sales brand.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So selling to large corporates. But the reality of the situation is just because you're not on the platform, it doesn't mean that the juniors in a team somewhere aren't on the platform. So what was happening to us is the marketing execs who were following Hydrogen and engaging with the content we were creating at Hydrogen. Then when they said, "Do you know any social media agencies?" the marketing exec puts their hand up and says, "Yeah." there's a brand over here that we've been following, they're really good, and we would get a conversation as a result of that. So I think that, there's some real kind of positivity in that space, and I think that is the point. If just because you're not on it, you might not be your end audience. So sometimes it's look at it, get in there first, get the march in the rest of the space, and you'll probably see some results out of it, and then keep your eye out for what's next.
So in terms of like TikTok, most people think that you have to do something eye-catching and cheesy because you see all the things that work well in TikTok are a certain lens, aren't they? So if you are a traditional boring brand like SSE, I know you can't say they're boring, but I will, or someone who is an insurance firm, how can they is that ads on TikTok then, rather than trying to do it organically?
Probably not. Like a mix of things, right? So you're obviously going to spend on ads to try and get your product in front of people. You've got to do that. But essentially, it's how do you bring your brand and your culture to life, and it doesn't necessarily need to be selling product. And this is where they all get caught out. How can we make our product sing on that platform? Sometimes it's about how do we make the internal organisation sing on that platform. So if you take an energy brand, as we were discussing, which might be described as a boring brand, it's brand exposure, because you get to see in behind the scenes. People get a feeling for your brand. So why do you choose one lawyer, accountant, energy brand, insurance firm above another one? Sometimes from a commoditized space, it will come down to cost. But actually, for a lot of people, it comes down to feeling towards a brand. And actually, if you're like much of a muchness when it comes to cost, because you've seen internally within an organisation and you feel that they're a bunch of good people, they're the sort of people that I quite like, and they're doing good things, whether it's for charity or whatever else it happens to be. You bring your brand to life in that space. You show people behind the scenes. They might then just connect with that and say, well, actually, I'm not going to choose brand X, I'm going to choose brand Y because I've seen them and I feel more for them than I do for this brand who I've only ever seen ads for that are telling me that they can get a cheaper price. You know?
I know that's an interesting way of looking at it. So rather than trying to sell something, sell the brand, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah. I think for a lot of people, they miss that narrative. Why would you follow somebody in social if all you're going to do is get sold to?
No one likes getting sold to.
Exactly. So therefore, but how many brands just go out there and it's like sell, because I need to, every single thing is followed with a link to book an appointment or buy a product or whatever else it happens to be. Obviously, for your ad campaign at the top level, that makes sense. But beneath that, how do you create connection? And as you create connection, that's what the social space is there to do.
Do you think the old-fashioned top, middle and bottom of funnel still has a place, or has it been superseded?
I think there is still necessarily a place for that. I think you cannot. Well, you can if it's a cheap enough product, right? You can go top to bottom of the funnel. I've never heard of your TikTok shop's obviously a classic for that. There's a point where, where there's a case of, I've never seen this before, I want it, I can purchase, boom. Yeah. So that's a very quick purchase. But when it comes to like a larger brand or a larger purchase or something that is a higher cost, you still need to have a view on that brand. You still need to trust that brand and understand, is this somebody who I want to basically sign up for the long term? You're going to look at the reviews and build trust around about that. You're going to look at their website and say, is there anything else that I need round about there? And then you're potentially looking at a transaction model. And the bottom end of the funnel is a hard thing to transact on. You're going to go elsewhere. So the reality of the situation is you still get pushed down a funnel,
a path or something,
but it's coming from multiple different locations. There's not just a singular point where it goes A, B, C, down you go. It's coming in from loads of different places, and people are doing their own research and jumping off platform. And if you think you can basically convert somebody in a straight line, that's not going to happen.
Because we are a perceived boring brand. I have a data center company. Unless you want a data center, you're probably not looking for data centers. But before that, particularly before COVID, customers tolerated our sales process. Now, we wanted them to go in at a certain bit, and it was very old-fashioned. We're going to qualify, you're going to move your gates, we're going to move all the rest of it. And they basically had to go through that process because they had no choice. But all of a sudden, they didn't have to go through that process. They were doing all their research themselves. They were actually finding out more about you from different locations and different areas. And what we found out was more staggering was, see if that information wasn't there. We are Scotland's biggest data centre by a country mile, by a long, long way. But see if that information wasn't readily available and someone who had a much lesser product where, they would just gravitate to them out of sheer laziness sometimes. So I guess you can have a bit of an arrogance when you have the best of something, because they're saying we are the best and they'll spend the time to figure out we're the best. They don't.
Yeah, they don't. I talk about this all the time, actually, when I'm doing mentoring and when I stand up in front of rooms regularly. I think there's a point, I call it your digital shopfront. And I've been banging this drum for years, but the reality of the situation is people... This is why smaller brands have really succeeded in the digital space, because you look at your banking space, even you look at your Barclays and RBSs and whatever this were, they are the arrogant brands, they are the huge brands that sort of sat there, and then along came Revolut, Monzo, Tide. There's loads and loads of digital first banks that have basically came out of nowhere and really stolen a march in that space. The reality of that is it's been caused by what I would say them setting out their digital shopfront correctly. So if you think about an old school shopfront, which is kind of where a lot of these brands started from, you would arrive in a high street and you'd walk up a high street. So let's move you into a high street that you've never been in before, and somewhere in the Lake District, you've not done your research or whatever. You land there, you walk up, and you will only view a shop and whether you want to go into that shop based upon the shopfront that they've got, the physical window dressing that they've got, and what they've got presented in that shopfront. And that will determine whether you go in that shop. The same exists in the digital space. So whether you'll engage with a brand will be determined by their digital shopfront. So if you've never needed a data center before and you just do a search, your digital shopfront, regardless of how big you are as a brand, will determine whether somebody connects with you. So that'll be your Google listing, that'll be your Google reviews, that'll be your social reviews, it'll be your social presences, all of the stuff that you put out there that shows somebody, this is me. This is why you need to connect with me, and this is why you need to open that door and come in my shop, which is effectively your website. If you can't get people in the door because you don't take care of your digital shopfront, and the amount of people who have got dead social presences, have got 0 reviews on their brand, and then they're going, why are we losing customers to this brand over here? They're dinky, but they've got 500 positive reviews and they've got like a really flourishing social presence. That's what people are gravitating towards, rather than the physical presence and the physical brand that you sat behind. So if you can't get people in your door, you're screwed. You're eventually going to end up in a situation where they'll just all go into this shop and make it bigger.
Because I think people forget about buying behaviour. It doesn't really change, but actually, see if you're buying, say you're buying a new lawnmower, something really dull. I know I would sit and look at the reviews of that, perhaps, in terms of can the grass cutting bit get down low enough and all that. So if I'm then in my professional life going to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds or millions onto that, it seems ludicrous that people don't think you need the basics. Like, I don't want to read a review. Of course you want to read a review, you want to be more confident, but it seems to be the higher you get up the value chain, the less fundamentals there are on reviews, real life experience of products.
I think, as you said, like, people, you get a bit lazy. Like, we spent billions on our brand presence and, brand exposure and whatever else, or sponsorship or whatever else it happens to be. And that should do the job. But the reality of the situation is people will still go through that same journey regardless, and they'll do it in a digital space. And if your digital doesn't tie up to the brand that you actually are, you're in trouble.
No, it seems overly simplistic.
But it's true.
It's approach. So, taking a step back, you said that you had an idea that you wanted to sell hydrogen. Was that always the concept, sitting in your bedroom?
Yeah, I think I'd been through exits before in business, as in I wasn't part of them. I wasn't part of the leadership team at the time, but I'd seen it happen from a distance, and there was this kind of view that, well, look, if I need to change my life and my family's life for the better, then, I'd never wanted necessarily to run a lifestyle brand. There's lots of ways you can approach an agency where you're going to be in there forever, which is fine, but that was never really my view. I had a kind of vision in my head to sell it within 5 years. That was kind of what I said to my accountant at the very start, but the reality of the situation was that was just a number. You know what I mean? It could be in 10 years. But it was to give me something to say, right, look, if I'm going to build this business, I'm going to put fundamentals in place that will make it a sellable business. So I can't lead, I can't be the front of the brand in that case, because if I stand in front of the brand, I devalue the business, because taking me out of the business I become an issue. Similarly, you look after your EBITDA like it's golden, effectively. You're making sure that you're maintaining margin year on year. So like that's, the financial rigor that you put in place. If I wasn't to think I was going to sell it, would I really put the financial rigor in place at the very start? Probably not. Even when you're thinking about setting up the brand, there's a case of sort of going, right, why do you call yourself Hydrogen and not like Mike Scott Social? You know what I mean? So but if I call it Mike Scott Social, then I can't remove myself from the brand, because it's all about me. So I think there's a point where having that thought process and that mentality, whether you ever get to that, it helps you drive the business in the right direction and puts some good financial and business logic in place.
So how long were you in when the thought actually started to say, right, now's the time?
Anytime I do coaching, I always ask people this question quite quickly, like, do you have a number? Or what is your number? And I kind of had a number in my head. I'm not sure if Dan did, but we both we discussed the fact that there was a sale potentially on the horizon. We came out of COVID, and the business was growing. It was growing really, really, really fast, which is good. But we didn't have the finances to make that growth maintain itself, because we were cash poor effectively coming out the back end, which is fine. But we were saying, right, look, if we were going to try and get an office in Manchester and an office in London and really kind of take hydrogen to where it should go and what's going to happen there, we need funding. Because we didn't have cash flow within the bank to do that, and I don't want to hold it back. I didn't want to have a business I'm holding back and constraining it, and I see so many business owners holding it back either because they need to control things or whatever. And I was like, look, that's not really for us. So we went out and we looked for funding, and we actually looked to ship Social Media Training School as a brand. We were still like, look, you might get a good few thousand for that, but it didn't happen. But then the people who we were talking to about that said, have you ever had hydrogen valued? I was like, nope, wouldn't know what it would come in at. So they came back with the valuation, and that was above the number that I had in my head. And I was like, actually, okay, we're going to hold this business back. It needs funding to make it happen. If we're going to sell, we need to sell it to the right people.
Is that an EBITDA multiplier?
Yeah. So if we need to sell it, it needs to sell it with the right person that's going to take the brand forward and maintain the brand and give it a footprint that can grow into that we couldn't do. And I think that was it. For us, it was... everything kind of started to align, and then the people who came in to eventually buy us, that's what they were talking about. And I was like, right, fine. We rejected a number of other people because they were talking to smashing brands together and whatever, and I was like, that's going to be a nightmare. It's not what I want for the brand. It's not what I want for the team. So we put protections in around about the brand, protections in around about the team, and it was a case of saying, right, look, what are you going to do for this brand moving forward? So I felt like the brand continues beyond me, and it's as it should, and the team will benefit out of it rather than me constraining it, holding it back while I spend X years trying to recoup the cash flow that COVID has stripped out of the business.
So the from the valuation to the exit, how long was that? Or signing the agreement?
8 months.
That's quite quick, isn't it?
Yeah. I think the thing is once you kind of get on that bus, there's no getting off.
Yeah.
Well, there is. You can basically back out any time, let's face it. But
it's a mindset change as
well,
well,
isn't
it?
Yeah, it's an absolute roller coaster. Stressful, most stressful period of my life.
Was it?
100%.
Was it on and off? And
no, not necessarily. I think it was just. It's just due diligence is a horrible thing to go through, and I think so we were bought by the Press Association, so they were used to coming in and their heavyweight London auditors, lawyers, accountants. So
it's very exposing, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah.
and I think the thing is when they took the same rigour to us as they took to massive purchases that they've done in the past, which is fine, it's as it should be, but we're a relatively small business in Scotland, and I was like, whoa, do we even have this stuff? But it was stressful, but I think as well the numbers at play were life changing, and I think for me that life changing moment, I'm not saying the idea of thinking beyond that was really difficult because it could have collapsed at any point in time, and you're always told these things can collapse at any time. Market changes, recessions, these things change overnight, and all you needed was something to come along that's basically going to put a spanner in the works here, and then they back out. And if you've thought beyond the sale process to what life could potentially look like, that would be devastating if I'm being perfectly honest. Despite the fact I'd still have a cracking brand and whatever, I didn't want to ever think beyond that. So I just kind of kept myself in the moment up until the moment that the actual purchase went through. And then it was like, right, okay, that's relief.
So when you logged into your bank and you saw the cash for the first time for the thing, was it bittersweet or was it relief? Was it?
It was relief that it's happened. I think we very quickly moved into functional mode because we needed to talk to the team, we needed to talk to the clients. It's bittersweet in a sense because, you know what I mean, you just let your business go. But the thing is you've had time to reconcile yourself with that and go, right, look, this is the right thing. And I knew it was the right thing, and I knew the brand we were selling to was a really, it's a press association. They've been around for over 100 years, you know what I mean? They're very super trustworthy, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? So I think for me it was very much a right place, right brand, Right decision.
Right decision. So again, if someone's sitting there looking for a bit of advice, they're getting ready to sell a company, what do you think is the most important things to consider?
Be sure on your number, 100%. And be sure on your next number. What I mean by that is like, your numbers move.
Aye.
Right? So somebody says to you, I'll give you X. And then they adjust and it comes down and they go, I'm going to give you Y. Are you still going to accept Y? What is your bottom? When do you bail out? So be certain on that and don't let that flex, because if you go below that number, and you'll be ultimately disappointed that you let it away for something less than you would have at the very start. Be certain and have your red lines. I had a load of red lines, and we rejected a number of different offers because of that. Despite the offers being really good, we were just like, it's not going to happen. So make sure your red lines are there and you don't kind of move them. And I suppose, don't chase after daft things. Like, I had a conversation the other week, and I'm not going to name names or talk numbers, but this guy had a multi-million pound offer on the table, and he was looking for something that was just a fraction above that. And I was like, why?
Hey, come on.
Why? Like, what difference is that going to make in your long-term future life? Very little. You know what I mean? But it was a matter of principle for him that he wanted to get this number, and I was like, right, okay, that's fine, but if that offer goes away,
It might never come back.
it might never come back. And I think that's why I was saying, be sure on your number, and have a number that sort of goes, well, actually, like, what do you actually need from life beyond this point? Is it a case of, you want to live in a yacht and be an oligarch? Then fine, okay, cool. If that's what you genuinely want in life, then that's cool. But for other people, for me, it was like, I had a 7-year-old son when we sold the business. And for the last 2.5 years, I get to walk him to school and pick him up from school every single day. And it was a really important thing for me, was actually spending time with him while I can still do that. Because believe me, when he's 10, I'm not walking him to school because he'd be like, you're a loser. It's not happening. Yeah. So
I'm there.
I just kind of am like, right, okay, fair enough. So these things are really important to me. So what's driving your decision? Make sure that you're kind of cool with that and move that forward, and don't get hung up in the daft little things.
Yeah. I guess you've also got to make sure you can actually get through due diligence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
Don't lie.
Watch a lot of content about what due diligence is going to contain. What things, like I talk about, it's a terrible phrase, but get your ducks in a row. Like, make sure that your policies are in place, make sure that your insurance is in place, make sure that all the contracts are in place. All of these things are going to be required by due diligence, and if you're not there and you're not in that position, don't start the sales process, because it's going to be hellish making it up in the middle of it.
And it's an opportunity to be devalued.
Oh, 100%.
Well,
as soon as you add risk into this situation, risk into this equation, they're just going to be like, right, down it comes. So you're literally cutting your own throat. It's pointless.
Yeah.
You know?
I think a lot of companies actually look for the opportunities to chip.
Yeah, 100%.
That price was based on a perfect outcome. This isn't a perfect outcome, so I'm afraid the price needs to go down. So, how long did you have to stay in the business after you sold it?
2 years.
2 years. Was that hard? Or did you just phase yourself out?
No, mentally it was hard. I think the thing is, like I said, I never thought about what was post-exit until the sale went through. I didn't want to think like that. But then you find yourself in a space where you are now post-exit and reality hits. And it is hard. I think there's a point where there's no business owner can say it's going to be easy. And it wasn't hard because of PA. If I'm being 100%, it wasn't like, you hear the horror stories sometimes about these, the buyer comes in and changes everything, and you're no longer in control of it, and you have to kind of watch that. Like, I think for me, it was hard because it wasn't mine anymore. And I was coming in and changes were happening round about me, and I think that you had to kind of let it go, and I had to start to take a step back. And I used to actually come the second year, like I barely stepped in the office. I kind of helped from afar, and it was like, look, I'm available if you need me to be available, and I can help out with certain things. But it was a real difficulty going into the office because I just didn't, it wasn't that I didn't like what was happening. Like, actually the team were absolutely flourishing. I couldn't mentally be there as such. You know, I was like, I need to move on. I need to move myself on for my own sake.
They're on a different journey.
You know what I mean? And they're on a different journey. You're going that way, and I need to force myself to go this way. I can't keep in this lane. So there was a kind of, I need to remove myself from that conversation and think about what next was going to be. So yeah, it is difficult, but, you know, because I really love the brand, and I still do love the brand. And, like, you know, and by the way, if you need a social media agency, go to Hydrogen. But there's a point where, because it's no longer yours, you need to move your lane, and you need to forcefully move your lane. And I think that's a difficult thing for a lot of business owners to do.
Yeah, no. And your last day in the office?
Like I said, I barely went in. the
So
second
it wasn't
year.
like a big bang type of thing. It was
No, I had we went in for a leaving do,
Yeah.
and the time I went in, there was a whole bunch of new people that joined that I didn't know. It was lovely to meet them and just, you know, get introduced to them, and, you know, they'd obviously heard my story and were keen to hear from me as well, which was really nice. Loads of positivity around about the business. They've gone on and won some amazing contracts since I left, and I think the thing is the business is really flourishing, so it's in a really positive place, and it was nice to go in and just kind of do a nice send-off and go for a few drinks with the team.
Has there ever been any regret about selling?
No.
No.
No, I think it was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would have held the business back, and that would have been stupid.
Yeah. I was actually speaking to another founder, and he was very honest about, I'm not the person to take the business to where it needs to go, so I need to go.
I think I could have, with funding, I could have taken it there.
Yeah.
I think there would have been no doubt, but I think that...
That's a different life for you then, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's
like,
your
and I think that's it.
VCs now.
You hit this crossroads for your business, and I was like, look, I really want to look at my family and spend time with them and spend time with my son. And I had the choice of going, right, well, if I'm going to take it in this direction, if we had the funding in place, then I'd have been up and down the country all over the place. And, I'd have moved into that lifestyle, which had been fine. Like, don't get me wrong, and loads of people live for work, and that's it. I just didn't believe that was the right thing for me to do. And as a result, I was like, look, this probably feels like the right time to kind of pass the baton, if you want to call it that.
So, I guess looking forward into the future of the industry, we've got the biggest, across all industry, we've got the biggest disruptor coming, AI.
Yeah.
Well, coming, it's already here.
Yeah.
Now, marketing seems to be well in the crosshairs of its first tranche of things it wants to disrupt.
Yeah.
And one of the other founders I had in the other day, he was talking, he runs an online talent agency
Right.
where you can place jobs within enterprises, and he was saying that one of the most...
Is that Rich?
Rich, yeah. One of the most popular things used to be copywriters.
Yeah. Yeah, they're really suffering.
And he said it's been decimated. He said it's and same for people with brand and all that. It's been going as well. So, what's your view on how agencies are going to cope with AI?
This it's a hard question, but actually, if you view history, it's a story that's played out numerous times. So I look at the digital agencies that I were in, building websites, and we used to get 25 grand for a small website from Visit Scotland, let's say. So you'd basically be building one or two of them a month, and that's fine. And it was a good kind of tick over money, and then there'd be larger kind of campaigns that would come in. That morphed and changed, and along came Wix and Squarespace and all these tools that allowed smaller businesses to build their own websites and create their own web campaigns and email campaigns. And what they've done is they've facilitated the bottom end of the market or the smaller players to do stuff themselves. So it benefits the smaller businesses that don't need marketing functions or like a digital function anymore, because they can do it themselves and they can manage it themselves and they can drive it themselves. So what does that harm? That harms the agencies who are at the bottom end of the market, servicing that bottom end of the market, and delivering small websites. But the big players will do okay. The smaller guys lose out. I think the same will happen with AI. I think what's going to happen is those people who are servicing social media at a higher level or marketing at a higher level, they're still going to need big creative campaigns, they're still going to need big ideas, they're still going to need strategy. And social, like AI will play into that, because they will utilising it as a research tool or utilising it as a kind of cost saving for your business to generate ideas. 100% you're going to utilise AI at the top level, but at the bottom layer, where all of a sudden these smaller businesses who would potentially access smaller agencies to service them, they're going to find themselves in the same space where the smaller businesses can utilise AI to write all of their content for them, that can do design for them, that can create logos for them, that can create ideas and posters and whatever else it happens to be. So if you're servicing those smaller businesses, you're probably going to find yourself in trouble. There will be a point where agencies can maybe look at maximising that, where there might be some smaller businesses who won't know how to utilise AI, and the smaller business can now create margin. Agency can create margin out of that because they can utilise AI and obviously do it in a fraction of the time. But I think there is going to be a shift, but I think it's going to be at the bottom end. I think the top end will do well out of it. And then where does it go? I think, like everything, authenticity is going to be key. So we're going to move into a space where if you've got AI talking to AI, delivering content to an AI bot that you've created as an avatar of yourself online potentially, that's sifting through what the social feeds are to say, here are the things I think you would be interested in. the authenticity is just going to the only thing that's going to cut through is how do we create something that's real. And there is obviously, it's getting better and better, don't get me wrong, but if you go to TikTok, the authenticity is there. This is why all the younger generation are flooding to it, because they want to see real people having real conversations about real things. They don't want brands talking as brands. They don't want fake AI bots talking on, so where does it end? Well, I think it's going to have to go back to authenticity. So the need to then create cut through, you go back to your agencies again to say, right, well, how do we generate that? Because we're getting no cut through because it's just all bland and generic.
So, in terms of what we're seeing, in terms of the side of data centres, and we are not a high volume type of traffic. So, interestingly, over the last 4 months, we have lead forensics, so we can see where data sources are coming from towards us. And 10% of the traffic now coming towards our sites from ChatGPT, and that's in just in 3 months. So obviously, ChatGPT's introduced search. And I guess it's agentic search because you can say, go and take these 10 steps and it's going to go towards this. Taking that a stage further, you've then got OpenAI's operator and Google's got it in different PCs. I've played about with it and it's a bit clunky at the moment, but that's the worst it's ever going to be. So that's the first thing. Where you basically say, go and book me a flight to Malaga, and it'll go off and check all the different websites and do all the different things. Now, where that's leading is you're going to have agents buying from agents. So I'll have a consumer agent that will go away and deal with 50 websites. They'll basically probably bid on it. It'll be some sort of bidding. This is what my consumer's ready to pay. This is what you're going to pay. And you have agents dealing with agents. That is going to completely decimate the traditional
Google search
and ads as well. What's the point of advertising on a website if there's no eyeballs on it? And you're already starting to see some of the websites are almost unusable because of the amount of ads that they're trying to serve to you. Their traffic's going down, their revenue's flowing, and the only thing they can try and do to address that is to serve you more ads. So I actually think the technology of the internet in terms of how it's monetized is going to have to find a new normal, because over the last 30 years they've come up with a mechanism of saying, well, there's two things that they want: your data and your attention. So it's, if you can't get their attention by advertising and it's a bot to a bot, what's the commercial model behind that?
It's a hard one. I think what you're saying is fundamentally true. I think there's going to be a point at a purchase level, it depends on what you're buying though, and whether there's an element of trust. So how much do you trust that your agent is going to really reflect the trust levels that you need in the brand that you're potentially, or the product you're potentially going to buy. So you might be like, right, okay, go and book me a flight to Malaga, but you really don't want to be on a particular airline, or you don't want to be on a particular flight time or whatever. And I get that you can obviously put commands in to make that happen. But there might be a point of sort of going, right, well, actually, bots maybe at a top level maybe don't do the transaction. They do the research and they go out there and they find the things, and they find the initial research list that you come back with and allow you to make the decision. And that final decision will be based upon a number of different factors, and one of them being trust and knowledge of the brand. So I think there will still be a need for brand awareness and brand knowledge, brand trust to be built somewhere. To allow people to go and do their own research to then say, I'm going to make that decision on my behalf as a human, rather than necessarily just allowing that to happen. Now, obviously, for a small transaction, that's fine. Go away and find me a particular T-shirt. Right, on you go. Go and get the cheapest version of that you can, and I need it in a large. Right, make that happen. That's fine. You can kind of trust it to do that. But beyond that, I think for larger kind of purchases, it might be a bit different. But yeah, like you say, there will be a new norm in the space. Really, I think from an AI perspective, you need to get on that boat, and if we can't deny that it's not here.
It's a massive opportunity. Now, with disruption, there's always opportunity.
100%.
There's winners and losers. I've been doing some courses, presenting some courses on AI to people, and what I always say is industrial revolutions change things. They fundamentally change. If you look at it, it's always technology. So whether it's farming, factories, transport, advertising was a big industrial revolution, cinema. These things have always had an impact. To be an industrial revolution, it has to be if you look at them over an average, it's something like 1.5% of global growth in global GDP from an industrial revolution. Now, they're saying AI is going to do maybe 12-13% GPT growth. So there's a massive opportunity. So a lot of people are clearly worried about AI and what's coming, but interestingly, looking at the next consumer, which is the current generation that are at high school, there's really interesting patterns that are shown. So they have the most access to technology of any generation that's ever had in terms of information, but they're the most lazy in terms of actually critical thinking. In terms of that's what the computer told me. And I see that as a real concern about having the ability to independently think and come. So now you're going to have AI that Google will give you 15 answers. How AI works is it will give you an answer with absolute certainty, even if that answer's not true. The model doesn't want to say, I don't know. It will give you absolute certainty. So I actually think in the future, a lot of people are going to be happy to be told what their opinions are.
It'll be difficult. I think there's AI is going to... It's going to throw up a load of problems. You know, I think that we've talked about it from... I've been at talks where they talk about the idea that entry-level jobs, how do you get experience? You know, so if you can replace entry-level roles with AI, which a lot of businesses can, you know, so you take lawyers, for instance, and you're saying, like, at an entry level, what you're doing, you're probably reviewing documents. If you can chuck that in an AI engine and let that do the job, then is there a need for 5 individuals? It might be 1 individual in AI. So therefore, there's no entry-level jobs at a certain marketplace, and that's going to be a huge risk coming up. There's also, I suppose, I remember talking to somebody Age Concern, and they talk about digital poverty, and obviously you get that nowadays, you know, with the older generation who really haven't adopted the internet to the case that it can be, and still need to do banking in person, and still need to, you know, send physical letters and whatever else it happens to be. And as everybody moves to a digital model, they're being left and put to the side. And AI is going to happen the exact same way. Like, ultimately, people will adopt it, and there'll be others who'll be saying it's not for me. But if you don't adopt it, you'll be left behind. And as you say, there'll be a generation behind you that will not be using Google, and they'll be using ChatGPT or whatever the engine is that kind of drives things. So,
but then, as you say, you go full circle, because you see the power of a brand just now, especially on TikTok. There's a sandwich shop in Glasgow that went viral on TikTok, and I walk past it most days, and at 8 o'clock in the morning they're queued around the block. And ultimately, from what I can see, I'm not going to stand in the queue. I'm too old to stand in the queue for a sandwich. But I think it's a cup it's served in.
Right.
You get a cup. You take a photo with a cup.
Right.
But congratulations to them. They've obviously done a great job in doing that. So I guess where probably marketing needs to pivot is social media probably will become the search engine rather than Google. And it's probably going to be...
It already is for a lot of the generation.
Yeah,
like a lot of people... You know, my wife's just back from Palma, actually, so her and her friend went to Palma, and they used TikTok to figure out what bars they were going to and what restaurants they were going to. They weren't using Google. They weren't, you know, trying to figure out on Google Maps where that place is. They were just saying, what are these cool brunch spots? What are the best, you know, bars and restaurants? Exactly, and it was TikTok that was making that decision. They weren't searching anywhere else.
And TikTok in itself... in Europe, it's become one of the biggest consumer platforms that people don't realise. That TikTok shop is massive.
Massive. And, you know, like out in the Asian markets, it's already been there. You know, online selling, like physical selling, it's now obviously coming to the UK, but they've been doing it for years. So that's really what's next, is that ability to hold up a product and sell it within a click, and boom, off it goes.
And they're and all the big brands starting to now pivot onto the TikTok shop as well.
Yeah, 100%.
And Amazon have seen a direct drop in revenue compared. So obviously they were the disruptor. They came in, shut the bricks and mortar by providing services. You can order anything, get it to your door. Now Amazon aren't going away. Right?
They're not. Yeah,
I'm not saying that. But in terms of, you can see how the platform's altering now. People want to see the top that person's wearing within that video. I just want to click it and buy it. I don't want to have to try and find out where it is and what brand it is. I actually just want to click on the photo and buy the shoes, or buy the top, or buy the hat, or actually I'll buy the whole outfit.
Yep.
Aye.
And I think there's a point where, so I've actually just invested in a business that's an AI personal shopper.
Wow. So
there's this view of how does this, you know, how do you search this thing, gets to know you, what you need in your wardrobe. And therefore it will go out and basically say, this is the brand you should buy X from. and that's it. So do you shop anymore, or does your personal shopper just say this is the top you're missing to complete your look? Off you go.
Yeah, have a look.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's where the agentic bit of AI comes in, because you'll have a specialised agent for shopping, you'll have a specialised agent for your healthcare that's good to you. So these vitamins and brands, they are, and with you do keto, so that's what you do. So it's a brave new world, isn't it?
It's going to be scary. It's scary. Change is always scary. It always is. The fact that we're at the very forefront of it, there was a social media revolution, I suppose, from a business perspective, and we were quite lucky to be at the start of that. But how quickly has that changed? You know, like that was 8 years ago, and all of a sudden there's this thing called AI coming along. In 8 years' time, where are we going to be? Don't know.
Do you have another build within you, do you think, for what's next? Or is it more about investing?
Possibly. I think the thing is a person like myself, you always want to get your teeth stuck into something. Do I want to build another agency? Probably not. Do I want to build something? Possibly. It's just the right idea at the right time. And I think that, you know, these things come when you least expect them. I've got a luxury at the moment, which I never had back then, which is time. I get to make a decision rather than be forced into a decision. So I think there's a point where I can get to have a look and say, right, look, there's something else coming along. But for just now, doing business coaching, doing mentoring, do a bit of charity mentoring, which is really nice. Non-exec work, it's keeping myself driving forward and kind of helping people out, which is really nice.
Excellent. Well, Mike, it's been an absolute honour speaking to you. So thank you very much for coming in. Catch up soon.
Cheers. Likewise. Thanks.